There is a saying that goes that let your kitchen be your pharmacy. We don't eat the way we used to eat. So that's why you need medication sometimes to help your body do what it's supposed to do.
Using food as medicine, you can address certain health issues, for example, scurvy with vitamin C or ricket with vitamin D.
I start from what is your lifestyle like? What do you eat? So that when I give you, I suggest a medication, the medication fits in what you do.
The 70s and 80s, obesity and overweight actually really shot up globally.
A lot of times the meds you take can interact with the foods that you're taking. There's this quick fix mentality. Instead of looking at lifestyle so that you change a bunch of things, you will bring in a drug to do a specific thing. Using ketone diet for people who have seizures literally shifts the healthcare.
Dr. Lucas, tell us about your journey.
So I'm a doctor of I'm a clinical pharmacist, and I have a doctoral pharmacy. And there is a saying that goes that let your kitchen be your pharmacy. And also the fact that a lot of times we don't eat the way we used to eat, where we are designed to eat. Our bodies, in terms of how they metabolize foods, we don't give the body what it was designed to do. So we also work it a little harder. So that's why you need medication sometimes to adjust what your body needs to do, to help your body do what it's supposed to do. And that's where I come in, because a lot of times the meds you take can interact with the medications, the foods that you're taking. And if they interact, either you lose the nutritional value from the food, or you lose the benefit from the medication. So the idea of actually managing what you eat and the medications you take and what you need, your body needs, is an interesting, a very intricate balance that you have to meet, without which you will shortchange one or two of the other aspects. So I come in, my journey mostly is, I've been very health conscious, trying to see what am I eating, I've been very keen on what I eat. And as a result, I've been very keen on ensuring that in my profession, when I am counseling a patient or talking to a patient or even suggesting a therapy, I start from what is your lifestyle like? What do you eat? What is your life like? So that when I suggest a medication, you don't have to change your lifestyle to fit the medication, but the medication fits in what you do, which is then boosts compliance. Mm-hmm. And that's the play that I have with foods and patients and medications. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, very interesting point. Julia, what do you think? Kitchen as your pharmacy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that really applies to this functional nutrition approach, like using food as medicine, or the other way around. And I think there's a lot of research these days that you can actually address certain health issues, for example, boost your immune system or even balance your hormones through food you eat. So it's quite promising at the moment, yeah. Or it's also called, functional nutrition. And it's also really based on your individual requirements. So that's what we call precision nutrition. So really based on the individual. Mm.
And naturally, we're going to explore many of these areas, especially in regards to nutrition on sort of based on the individual. Because that's also one thing, right? Research shows you something, but then what applies to you personally. And now we're going to dive a little bit into the evolutionary background of nutrition. And Julia, I was wondering if you could, take us through the evolution of nutrition, essentially, right? From early 20th century to where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, food and nutrition has been studied since so long, since so many years, but modern nutrition science is surprisingly young. So it was just in the 1920s that the first vitamin was isolated and defined. And from there, like many food components, other vitamins, minerals were discovered. And it was, found out that you can treat certain deficiency diseases with certain nutrients, for example, scurvy with vitamin C or ricket with vitamin D. So in the early part of the 20th century, a lot of research was about these single food components and single nutrient deficiency diseases. And because of these successes, one decided to fortify certain foods, for example, bread with iron, vitamin B3, or salt with iodine. And also one saw that that decreased, for example, goiter through the iodine or anemia. So it was successful in that way. And then during World War II, there was quite the... people noticed that, or really associated food with health, youth, and strength. Yeah, so there it became also quite popular to have a healthy diet and to ask researchers what is actually the minimum requirement that people need of certain nutrients in a day. So there, mid-20th century, the first dietary recommendations were defined based on certain nutrients and daily requirements. But there was a shift in the mid-20th century from deficiency diseases to more chronic diseases or diseases of affluence, as you might say, non-communicable diseases, for example, heart issues. And one also still focused on individual nutrients, especially fat and sugar during that time, especially between the 50s and the 70s. And some scientists had the opinion that sugar is more responsible for chronic diseases. Others said it's fat that's very related to heart diseases. And it was quite a battle between the two. But in the end, fat won that debate, also politically. And the food industry reacted to that. So that was the start of the low-fat era, when you saw a lot of low-fat products developing.
Was that also with the kind of the sugar-free things, or no? Was that different? Was that later on?
That came a bit later. Exactly.
It was
a little bit shifted. I think more introduced in the 90s or so with the artificial sweeteners and that's when people had the opinion that if they eat sugar and fat-free as possible, they're doing the best for their diet. That was that low-fat era in the 70s and 80s, but it was also the time when obesity and overweight actually really shot up globally. So, in the 90s it was interesting that one realized different methodologies of nutrition research. So that one said, it's interesting to actually combine or have the complementary effect of observational long-term studies and randomized controlled trials. One also saw later on that as focus on single nutrients such as fat and sugar does not really respond well to the non-communicable diseases and the chronic diseases. So one approached it more through a diet approach and went a bit more from a disease treatment model to a disease prevention model. So that was also the time when certain diet patterns became popular, such as veganism, paleo, Mediterranean diet were more discovered or researched, and and that also a bit is the cause of why there are controversies today, because one went from the reductionist model of focusing on single nutrients to a more comprehensive model on looking at the overall diet patterns.
Got it. So, because you mentioned here the World War II and then this kind of shift into looking at diets and nutrition, longevity and how to live longer, how to live healthier. So it's feels like it's sort of it's a modern invention essentially. It wasn't there early on. What do you think about that? Lucas, because when we're looking at the pharmaceutical industry, and we're looking at treating people with pills, and you once again coming back to the kitchen as your pharmacy, that was so wonderfully put. How do you think that plays into this now whole longevity aspect? Because in today's, you can look at social media and everywhere, right? Diet and nutrition is such a controversial topic as well in regards to like what you eat and not. So how have we improved for the better in that regard? Because what Julia is also mentioning is all of these products that also now have led to obesity and many other things. How do we now kind of compile this into this, I guess, longevity aspect that we might have with nutrition?
So interesting that a few things that she said that were very interesting, from precision nutrition, and now we have precision medicine. which is also supposed, how do you use genetics to make sure somebody gets the right medication? So, of course, also, how do you use genetics to know the deficiencies, nutritional deficiencies that somebody has, so that what you need, what my brother needs, is not what I need, because we are brothers, but genetically we are a little different. So that's precision nutrition, which is really interesting, an interesting area to go to. The other thing that just that she mentioned is about when you get the non-communicable diseases or affluence diseases. In the 90s, when I was a little more involved in healthcare here, and then I got away for about 20 years from Kenya. In the 90s, you hardly saw anyone walking on the street with deficiency on one side, which indicates stroke. You hardly saw anybody who was obese. There were people you would count, even on TV, who were obese. And at that time, of course, our GDP was a little lower. We were eating a little more traditional foods that our bodies and our genetics understand how to take in and use. And as a result, we started getting the other things that we need, that we're getting now, the other foods that our bodies have not evolved to be able to pull out the nutrition it needs from it. And now if you walk in town, if you stand somewhere on the street in town, every direction, you will see 2 or 3, 4 obese people around you. When I was growing up, it was hardly the case. I can't remember, and maybe I'm also aging myself here, can't remember seeing anybody obese in my school. Not class, school. And we used to walk everywhere. So there was more activity, and the food nutrition was different. So I think the evolution towards the availability of some kinds of foods has actually affected not just our health, but also it's also affected the way we react and the way we treat illnesses. Because when you treat with one way, your body is seeing something different, because genetically not designed to deal with it. And that is a big deal. And that's why I think when she mentioned precision nutrition, I was smiling, because I think we need that. There's a lot of the nutritional science has been done not in Kenya or in Africa, but then we extrapolate the benefits and bring it to the Kenyan or the African context, which I think is a little inappropriate. Not wrong, but it needs to be a little more tuned in to ensure that our local foods, our local deficiencies are also considered in the research that's being done. Because
that's very interesting. Sorry to interrupt there, Lucas. So looking at, I guess, coming to the fact of cultural influence of food and nutrition and other things. So what do you think so why is that missing, right? Let's look at the region of Africa as a whole, let's say, and not only Kenya. And I guess this can also be appropriated to many other regions in the world where I guess certain studies have been done in certain regions. So how does that affect, I guess, the outcome in regards to dietary recommendations and so on?
I think it's many ways. Because first of all, if you look at the dietary, if you look at the, what's it called, the plate plan, I think that's the one that is a common one that they use. It does not have the local foods. I don't see managu in there. Neither do I see ndoma or, I don't see those foods. Those are foods that we use all the time, right? So if they're missing, should I now replace it with, we had a conversation about it, with an apple? Now, the first time I ate an apple, I think must have been around 20 years old, first time I ever ate an apple. But I ate fruits all my life.
But that's crazy. Like for me, I guess, I don't know for you, Julia, when did you eat an apple the first time?
Like 1.5, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
You see?
Yeah, there's a big difference.
It's a big difference. Cheese. There's a common thing that now you see everywhere. First time I ate cheese, I think I was in my 20s.
Do you know, I keep looking for cheese in the stores, and I'm just trying to find the ones from Sweden, but I can't.
There you go. And if you're used to eating the ones from Sweden, the ones that you get here will be lacking.
Yeah.
Just like even same thing as chocolate. I like 85% and higher. You can't find that one that doesn't have that much sugar. you find something that's close to chocolate. It's brown, right? Things like those. But I didn't need chocolate all along. When I was eating meat when I was younger, I remember it used to be the fatter the meat, the sweeter it is. Now they're saying put the fat aside. Question is, the fat, for example, the Framingham study, which is part of this, some of this about especially cardiovascular disease, which went to cholesterol management and the fat. The cows that were being the food, the meat that was eaten there are mostly corn-fed beef. The livestock in Kenya is grass-fed livestock. Do both those produce the same type of fat? Are both those fats deleterious, or are they differently nutritional values? Are both of them going to promote cardiovascular disease or not? And these are some of those intricacies that have to be looked at, because it's not apples to apples. It is apples to oranges. And I think that's part of the reason why I think we're having the disease burden we're having now, the NCDs that are coming, because we don't have a system, both genetically and even the healthcare system does not know how to deal with this new animal that we've never known. I mean, NCDs, now that we have to, when NCDs, nutrition will have to be a big part of it to manage NCDs, compliance, follow-up. These are not things that the healthcare system has been designed to do, from training to even just providing the care. If you look at the insurances we have, the coverages, very few of them have physicals, annual physicals that they pay for, right? Very few of them have a system to do compliance or follow-ups, because we were dealing with infectious diseases. 14 days, you're done with the antibiotic, go ahead and be the person you are. Now we have to monitor what you eat. You're telling me not to eat my fat in my meat? That's what I wanted. Now you're telling me not to eat this, not to eat that. So now we have to change the way we look at food, health, and management of it.
Yeah.
That's a new animal, and the healthcare systems, we have to really retool the healthcare system, especially in Kenya and Africa in general, to be able to meet this need of the handling of NCDs. And it's not an indigenous problem. It is an imported problem. And it looks like now the more affluent you are, the more you go and start achieving. I saw that they're selling corn-fed beef is more expensive in Nairobi, which is weird, because that's supposed to be the other way around. Yeah. So.
Very interesting. And I guess to the point of, now you're talking about nutritional management, diets, how to eat, what to eat. And this takes me to a question that's such a hot topic right now, and depending, of course, where you are in the world, because it can be different depending on where you are. A lot of people are showing interest in regards to tracking, calories burned, what kind of nutrition they're getting, everything from, is it protein, is it fat, is it sugar, what should I eat, what should I not eat? And that now comes down to one question, which is also relating to, the healthy lifestyle, losing weight, etc., where a very popular question, which is a calorie eaten a calorie eaten? Meaning, do you absorb that calorie, and is it different depending on what you eat? And how does our body react to that? That's a question I'd like to ask you, Julia.
Yeah.
What's your point of view in is a calorie eaten a calorie eaten?
A simple answer is no.
Yeah.
The more comprehensive answer, or what I've known about it, is first of all, there's this thermic effect of food. So, for example, when you digest protein, you need quite a bit of energy to digest protein. If you consume, for example, 100 calories of protein, you end up with 75 that you could theoretically use. With complex carbs, it's
so like 100 calories, that would be 75 that you actually absorb. So
from protein, exactly. That's just an example. But with protein,
but that's quite a big difference, right? I mean, let's say you ate 1,000 calories. That's 750 theoretically, roughly. Yeah.
With and generally, one says like it's about 10% of the calories consumed are for digestion, but for protein, it's particularly high. Protein, however, is a particular case again because the body rather uses it to build the body. It's like the main bodybuilding material, and it has so many different functions in the body. Like 50% of the dry mass of the body consists of protein. So the body mainly likes to use glucose, carbohydrates for energy. Then fat is the second favorite option, but only when the body doesn't have fat and carbohydrates to metabolize, it chooses the calories from protein. Otherwise, it uses it for other more important functions. Yeah.
So if you were to choose your favorite one, which one would you go for? No, but I mean, in the end, right? Like protein, fat, you have carbohydrates as well. Like which one should you go for? Like what's...
I mean, ideally, you consume all of them because if you focus, for example, too much on protein because you think it doesn't give me so many calories, it keeps me full. If you go overboard on that, then and you don't have enough carbs and fat, then you use protein as a calorie and not as a building material. So that's actually very detrimental to your health in the end. If you have a lot of protein but not enough carbohydrates and fats with the diet. So I think ideally for healthy people who want to become maybe healthier or maintain their health, you have to have a combination of these three things. You have to be sure your protein needs are met because protein can't be stored. You have to consume a certain amount every day to maintain your bodily functions. For children or teenagers who are growing, of course, it's important for growth as well. And for fats, there are like very important fatty acids that you also need on a regular basis that support your health. And carbohydrates mainly as an energy source, especially for your brain. So ideally, you have a combination.
and this thing about that's something that I guess is also a bit maybe not controversial, but it's debated in regards to how effective it is. So fiber, for example, combining fiber with sugar, with protein intake, with fat intake, does that affect the way the body absorbs? Or does it have any kind of function in regards to, is a calorie eaten a calorie eaten?
Yeah, I'm not aware that about fiber influencing how the calories are used. Of course, I know about the glycemic index and that it can slow down the way that blood is released, sugar is released into the bloodstream. So it has very beneficial effects there. But yeah, and fiber in itself, for example, the soluble fiber has some calories. So even there is a thermic effect. So even digesting fiber takes quite a bit of effort for the body. So if you eat 100 calories of celery, for example, that's mainly fiber and water. You can actually have a negative energy balance there.
Lucas, when you're hearing this, maybe this is something you're aware of or not, but like, when I hear 75 calories out of 100 calories. I'm like, I'm going to eat steak every day. But like, that's maybe not the best way to move forward, as Julia pointed out. But like, what are your thoughts around this? And
it's interesting, actually, because then it reminds me of some ethnic groups in Kenya who are heavy meat eaters, and you hardly see. I think the activity level is also higher, but then you hardly see that mass of obesity. You see a little less obesity with that much. So I think it kind of makes sense. And I think also now this is where now you start using food as also a way to manage your body. Because sometimes, for example, I think using ketone diet for people who have seizures, there's some cases where that shift of diet literally shifts the healthcare. It actually gives you better outcomes in healthcare wise, and you don't need to go to the other side effect of where getting a medication that's actually going to have side effects. And I'm not telling anyone out there who has seizures to stop taking their meds, no. But ketone diets have shown to increase the seizure threshold, in which case you don't really get to that. And that is, I think, the play that I think we're talking about here of how do you use diet to be able to stay healthy and do what you need to get your body to do what it's supposed to do. If you eat just protein itself, again, it could get a little more deleterious down the line. So it's where the balance is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I guess, and then it's also important to highlight to our audience, because I know that sometimes you'll hear us talk about anecdotal stories and what we've seen, and it's also important to differentiate, right? We have our research with our studies, and then we have our anecdotal stories. But
Correct.
It's important with anecdotal stories because that's also where we can learn and gain insights that can then also lead to studies, right?
Correct.
And even further. Sorry. So when getting into the calorie eaten is a calorie eaten again. Another hot topic, there's a lot of hot topics now, but in regards to weight loss, or like at least maintaining what we would consider a healthy weight of sorts. One of the things that's now come up more and more is naturally looking at medications and supplements and other things. Something you're probably very familiar with, Lucas, is Ozempic and treatment of diabetic patients, which is why it was developed in the first place, but now become a very, very popular drug for maintaining or losing weight.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view on this?
So it's interesting. So there's this mentality that is moving around, the quick fix mentality, where instead of looking at lifestyle so that you change a bunch of things, you will change or bring in a drug to do a specific thing. Bring in Ozempic for me to lose weight, but then continue with the habits and the nutritional habits that actually put me where I am. So then, in my book, we're not moving forward here. We're just recycling the same position. Because yes, I'll reduce my weight, but then at what cost? Because any drug you take, it doesn't matter. Take it in the right dose, whatever it is, it has a side effect. You're trying to tell your body to do something that it wasn't going to do. Any drug you take is doing that. So if you continue doing that, there is something that the body was supposed to do that it's not going to do. And you will lose that function with time, because that's evolution. That's how we are as human beings. Just like if you break your arm and you tie it up this way, there's atrophy, because we don't need to use that muscle anymore. That's the same thing. So if you get Ozempic, it's changing some function in your body. It is changing it. So if you're changing that and you're still keeping the same habits that you're trying to do to lose weight, at some point, Ozempic will not be as effective. At some point. It's adaptation. So at some point, it won't work. But you kept the whole thing. So then we'll go back to the same spot, but now with side effects.
Yeah.
And other changes that have happened in the body.
Could you take us through some of the, I guess not science, but some of the details in regards to like how Ozempic affects the body? Like what is it that happens essentially? Yes.
So it's what they call GLP-1 receptor blocker in a way. So it just it reduces the glucose utilization, which just now then reduces the sugar. I mean, that's how diabetes, because diabetes is when you cannot regulate the sugar that's actually found in the bloodstream. And through that, it is shown that it is mimicking a hormone in the body. And as a result, reducing that hormone from doing what it's supposed to do. And that's how it looks like that's how it's losing, it's enabling to lose weight. Now, the science is not as clear as it should be on how the effect is on how you're losing weight, which also to me is one of those things that we got to make sure we know what we're doing. Because even if the side effect is good, then what? What are the other things that come with that? Yeah. And that's pretty much what it does. So it's just a utilization of sugar. Yeah.
In recent, I guess, research, and for the audience, once again, we are going to link to any kind of articles we're referencing as well. Ozempic is a fairly, it's something new. I mean, for 5 years roughly out in the market, or maybe more. And some studies show that some of this weight loss might even be caused, or some part of the weight loss is actually from muscle and skeletal structure. And that's not something you'd always want, right? Yeah, you want to maintain a very strong muscular and skeletal muscular structure as well. So there is a lot of, I guess, contention on this point. But once again, the research is something that's ongoing. There's nothing that's showing this or the other. But what do you think? I mean, Julia, listening to Luca's reasoning here, right? You're bringing in a drug that is doing something, your body shouldn't be doing. And then that could, in the end, also lead to, most of the time, side effects, right? Which, as Lucas puts it, all drugs leads to. So what are your thought process here around the nutritional aspect and using medication, I guess, to lose weight, for example?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it could always be even used in combination, lifestyle changes, dietary changes, and medication for a certain amount of time, maybe to give you maybe a certain motivation to start or see certain results. But in the end, it seems that you can't really get around building a healthy lifestyle and healthy dietary patterns, as Lucas said, because we don't know how sustainable that is in the long term, and about the side effects and so on. So it's ideally it's when it is used, then also with recommendations on healthy lifestyle in addition, instead of only focusing on the medication.
Very true.
I think to add that, I think the quick fix was that exactly that. When you don't change your habits, so if Ozempic, you're using Ozempic as a crutch or as a ladder to move from here to there, and then as in combination with lifestyle changes that actually will last longer than the drug. So then that one I could support. When you're doing the Ozempic, because then now it gives you license to be unhealthy, because you won't put on the weight, but you can do everything you want, because that's what people do, then that's a problem, because that's a crutch. And that, once you pull that out, we are back to square one. Just like those people who go for surgeries, and bariatric surgeries, and then they go back to eating the way they were eating. You've had a surgery, a procedure already, but you've gone back to being obese because it was not the surgery, it was up here that you did not change that lifestyle to think and say, what I do is what is causing this. So how can we change what I do to make sure that I stay healthy? Yes.
The mindset in
Correct.
the end, right? And building that lifestyle. I guess continuing on this route of medication, supplement is also something that a lot of people seem to, and not only a lot of people seem to be using. There's a whole industry behind it, right? And there's a lot of money in it as well. And not saying in any way here, I'm not going to take a stand on one or the other. That's what you guys are here for. But it's an interesting subject, right? Because in regards to supplements, you have to look at, number one, what each individual present in regards to their levels of whatever, if it's vitamin D or vitamin C or the minerals in your body that you're trying, like what is it that you're actually supplementing? Are you actually supplementing something? Is there a deficiency there, for example, and is it required? So throwing this question to you again, Lucas, I mean, in the industry you're working in, do you take supplements? Let's start with that.
Actually, I don't.
Yeah.
And one of the things that there is an interesting anecdote, I don't know whether you're aware, that the FDA does not approve supplements. And a supplement, if I go out there and get leaves, crush
Sorry,
them.
Lucas, by the way, for viewers who don't know what
Oh.
FDA is. Yeah, just to... Yeah.
FDA is the Food and Drug Administration of the US.
Yeah.
All drugs go through the FDA, and you have to give a lot of research on what your claims are. So if I go outside and get a couple of leaves, crush them, put them in a capsule, and say this will help with this is a way to supplement your digestion because it's fiber. I could say that, and it'll pass. I can put it on the market and sell it. Okay. If I say it is going to treat then I have to give a whole study. There's a whole other documentation to go through the FDA to get that done. A lot of supplements have circumvented the FDA by just saying this is a support. And they will never say they treat it's always a little hazy, a little bit so that you don't pinpoint. So as a result, you have to be very careful where you buy your supplements from. And if you don't know what the quality is, there are various other organizations that have come together to try and standardize supplementation or supplements, then yes. The other thing I would suggest too, going back to the precision nutrition, there are micronutrient testing that can be done. Testing on nutrition, testing on your genetics to see what are those deficiencies that you're predisposed to. Then now you're supplementing in the best way possible. Other than that, supplementation is a very expensive exercise, and sometimes the return on investment is not there unless it is targeted. Yes. And that's why I don't take supplements myself. I just eat well.
Makes a lot of, you're saying unless it's targeted. So
yes.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by targeted is if you realize that genetically I don't absorb vitamin D as well, so then replenish that. If I realize that I am always short, and this is a common thing among iron is a common thing among women, that they sometimes do not have enough iron, then let's supplement that. Because we know that either for some reason, biological reasons and other things, you will lose a lot of iron. How do we supplement that? So now, should I be supplementing the same amount of iron as my wife or as my sister? Maybe not, right? But maybe my genetics predispose me to losing iron also in different ways. So maybe I need the same level. So that's why it's not a one size fits all. The supplementation market now is almost like a one size fits all. Oh, this is stem cell supplementation of some kind, and you're like, okay, then what? And you look at it and you realize it's actually a lot of good PR, but not quite as necessary. Now, please, I am not saying you don't supplement. I personally choose not to, but I'm not saying you don't supplement. There's some supplementation that is standard. For example, we are not in the sun enough for our bodies to make vitamin D. We don't spend enough time in the sun to make vitamin D. Especially African Americans or Africans in general, our melanin sometimes blocks that reaction. So unless you're overexposed in the sun, and we work in offices a lot, we're covering ourselves a lot, we don't make enough. And almost always, Africans seem to have deficiency in vitamin D. By all means, look for a way to supplement that. And that simply could actually change your life completely because of the things that vitamin D does in your body. Yes.
Julia, supplements.
Yeah, which is interesting what you mentioned about vitamin D. It reminds me when I worked in this ballet school where I was working as a nutrition consultant, and they told me that they found in the ballet students a lot of bone fractures, and they were wondering why that is, and they found in the end that they just don't go outside that much. And also that was in Hamburg in Germany, where the cloud cover is pretty intense. So there they really realized the importance of vitamin D for calcium. And personally, I also take vitamin D sometimes because I think that's the most necessary. And in Europe, for example, a large proportion is just vitamin D deficient, especially in the winter month. And studies show that even in the winter months in Europe, if you go outside, you don't it's just not strong enough to build vitamin D in your skin. So supplementation there is very important. But I've
so is vitamin D the only one? Or what do you, no. I know that this is because we're discussing, right? But others that might be.
It's just. There it comes back again to certain conditions, precision nutrition, what you're maybe vulnerable for. But generally, I think it's also important to mention that there are several randomized controlled trials that have actually sometimes failed really to find a beneficial effect, for example, in antioxidants that were consumed in supplemented form. And also show, like if you compare people who take the nutrient with a supplement or in whole foods, that it was more effective in the whole food version. And another aspect is that the body seems to like nutrient packages.
Sorry, so you mean eating the vitamin rather than from food rather than taking a supplement, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it seems, research indicates that the body prefers nutrient packages because there are many interactions between the nutrients that reinforce each other that are also important. For example, B vitamins are important to take in a complex if you take B vitamins. Otherwise, they're not as effective. So in the end, you have to be aware of these things. And also about these interactions between calcium, vitamin K, for example. If you highly supplement in calcium and don't have enough vitamin K, that calcium can get clogged in your arteries and actually increase the risk of heart disease. So I think, it very depends on individual circumstances, but it's important to be mindful about it. And
a lot of interesting things there that you touched on, Julia. First, I want to go back to antioxidants because that's also another topic, right? Where I love eating berries and strawberries. And to be honest, I've kind of been influenced by, the past 5-10 years where people talk a lot about antioxidants and how good it is and like what it does. But you said it might not have the effect that...
in form of a supplement than it has when it's combined in a food with other nutrients.
In a food, okay. So eating berries is good.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Lucas, how about you? Antioxidants
I agree. I totally agree with I totally agree because anytime you pull it, there's interdependency. Nature has a lot of interdependencies. Yeah. In general, there's always something that depends on another. And when you take the foods out and pull it out, I think one of the most interesting studies that have been done was one for medicinal cannabis. Medicinal marijuana, for lack of a better term, and they separated. So it's THC and CBD. So they separated CBD from THC, and they realized CBD wasn't working as well unless it had THC. So now what they've ended up doing is putting THC at below 0.3%, so that some of that benefit of that interaction actually helps, because CBD seems to have a lot of benefits in the body. Because we even have cannabinoid receptors, which means we need it. So the idea is it's the combination seems to work better than when you separate them. And that's the same thing I think what Julia is saying here is that if you eat, you supplement what is the process of pulling the nutrient from the fruit to put it into a capsule. Same thing as when you get probiotics. They are grown in an agar somewhere that is sterilized. Okay? Then it is put in a capsule. Then you swallow it. So it is coming into your body first without its natural food to sustain it into a harsh environment, which is your belly. What percent of that capsule do you think you absorbed or helped? Could be less than 10%. So, but you paid for 100%. However, if you had maziwa lala, it has a lot of probiotics in it. You take that, or fermented porridge, you take that, it has getting into your body with its own sustainable foods. So it still continues working, even if it's in the higher. So you get better outcomes from foods that have probiotics in them than when you have it as a supplement. Just by logic. Same thing, I think, applies to supplements.
So in general, both of your recommendations would be, food as much as possible. But I guess if there's nothing else, to resort to, then supplements could help you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about, I mean, everything now from calories to the science behind it to medication and everything. And I guess a lot of the people in the audience, they're thinking, well, you know, what about reality, right? How am I supposed to deal with this in real life? Everything from keeping track of calories to the vitamins to the minerals to, you know, having a balanced diet. All of us, we cannot become experts in nutrition. Maybe somewhat, you know, learning what's good and what's bad. But how do you actually execute a healthy lifestyle in regards to your nutrition and diet? What do you think, Julia? Like, how do you execute? How do you implement it, right?
Yeah, I think it starts with the right motivation. So maybe you just ask yourself, why do I want to be healthy? What's important about that? Or how do I want to feel when I'm healthy? Or if I envision myself very healthy, what do I see? How do I feel? So you get your own personal connection to that vision or maybe that goal. And I think that can help you. And I think it's really important to have like this very practical steps, to have foods, certain food stores in the house, like nuts and seeds are, for example, great for snacks or to use in meals, to add fiber, which is often a bit lacking in our foods. Omega-3 fatty acids, which is also often a bit lacking, healthy amounts of protein, and also to have healthy oils in your kitchen. So you have something you can always go back to or you have in the house. And yeah, to be prepared for healthy snacks as well. I think this can be something, or a start, at least, looking at the qualities of the macronutrients. So for carbohydrates, most people know that the whole grain is more healthy than the refined version. For protein, ideally, maybe a mix of plants and animal sources. And for fat, yeah, also to get different sources there, looking at mostly unsaturated fatty acids, like in form of olive oil, omega-3. Yeah, there are different types of oil that can help with that.
Got it. And, you know, I guess, Lucas, coming over to you. So what about yourself? You said you're not taking supplements and so on, but you have a wife that's vegetarian.
Yes.
You know, how do you make that work? How do you find a good, healthy balance and diet with you, your family, everything, right? Because once again, right, you're going to the store, and I mean, unfortunately, I can just look at myself, right? When you want to grab something that's just, it's fast and you want to get it done, you don't have time for it, etc. So again, a lot of these diets or a lot of these recommendations that are out there are, correct me if I'm wrong, usually a bit more time consuming than maybe some other things, right?
Correct.
So how do you work through that? Because time is everything in the end. Yeah.
What's your priority?
Yeah.
What are you using your time for?
Yeah.
I think one of the things we do also, we get a lot of organic vegetables, so that are grown, and how we know they're not, we grow them. So we know they don't have as much, or rather there are other places too you can go and they're organic, real organic, no chemicals, because that also, sometimes the pesticides will influence your absorption. So you have good fruit, but then it has that, and that affects how much of the benefit you get from it. But what we do is mostly is being very intentional. So for example, when the weeks that we do not, because sometimes we are not perfect, the weeks we don't prep, we have issues, and we buy and we buy and we buy, and you feel it. You also feel your lethargy comes in. But the weeks we are intentional, the Sundays we go get whatever we need, prepare, and we move on. It works pretty well. There's a time there that we were gluten-free at some point, because one of our kids was, and we used to make our own bread, and we would make gluten-free bread on Sundays, and we use it for sandwiches the whole week. And then we also, because we knew that, and we knew everywhere there's gluten. Actually, even ketchup has gluten, if you didn't know that. Very weird. But then we used to look for everything. So we had to make everything, including even cupcakes, cakes. When she goes for a birthday, we would give her a cake that is actually gluten-free, and we did all those things. And we felt, I can say there was a difference in how you felt then, because you were very intentional in what we do. Our health was important, and we paid attention to it. So I think it depends on that a lot. The other thing too is sometimes our cultures actually have the answers. If you look at the blue zones, there are, I think, 4. Some people argue there are 5. The Mediterranean diet, those folks who are in the blue zones.
Sorry, Lucas, again, for the audience, right? Blue zones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Blue zones are areas in the world where people are living to 100+ years or to almost 100 years or over 100 years without medications, without any diseases. I mean, they are just healthy at 100+. There's one, Okinawa is one. There is Loma Linda, around Loma Linda University in the US. There is also, is it the Greek island? And then I'm forgetting one more.
Not sure if there's one in Italy, but I'm not sure.
I think so, yeah. and the Mediterranean diet has come up very strong. Intentionality is also very strong. Loma Linda, for example, most of them are vegetarians because Loma Linda is like the capital, or there's a lot of Seventh-day Adventists around there, and they have this very specific foods they eat, and they live around that. And then also the other big part was mental health, the fact that there's a community and they work together. I can walk to my friend's house and pick some food there, or even just sit down and talk. So that's mental health part of the food. And that has allowed them to live to 100+ years. But that is their culture. They are not going out of their way to, let me supplement this, let me do this. They eat fats. They eat all these things that we try to say, hey, cut here, cut here, cut here. They do eat them. But their bodies have been designing, they have been evolving towards utilizing efficiently and optimizing the diet for their health. When we try, and we need to start from what is our culture, what is that evolution that has happened, how do we support it? And then you find out that maybe supplementation is not the thing that you need. You just need to really look around and see what you're eating and what is around you. And I think we have to be very careful too, because there has been, and for those who are scientists, and I want to put a disclaimer here, there has been a correlation between when there was the restrictions on cholesterol restrictions went up, as in it got more and more stringent. Then you started seeing a lot of neurological diseases. Now, nerves have the myelin sheath around it, which is purely fat. So was the fat restriction the reason why we ended up having neurological diseases, which is part of the diet? Is there a line through that? Has it been looked at? Are we now pushing, because you see there's all these other neurological diseases that were used not to be there or were not as rampant going up? What are some of those other things that we're not seeing? You need cholesterol to build your hormones. There's also the restriction of cholesterol led to also hormonal issues. A lot of hormonal issues in many people too. So what are these things that we do nutritionally without really looking at the side effects or what the knock-on effects are going to be? And a lot of times we are myopic. We're so fat is bad, and we myopically push something without looking at who are the collateral damage around this, and can we live with it? And sometimes we can't, but we have moved on. Just like the way we have obese people now in Nairobi, everywhere you look, because we got affluent and we thought, hey, let's get a burger, let's get a this and that and everything else. To what end? Yes.
So there was a lot of interesting points there, what you brought up. So one thing I wanted to touch on was correlation versus causation, right?
Correct.
Which is looking at a lot of these blue zones, and naturally this urge of living longer. Anybody, of course, wants to live longer and healthier, right? That's always something that we want to achieve. But looking at the correlation and causation in these zones, right? You have the diet, which is part of it, but then how about, mental health? How about environment? Like,
Correct.
all of these, and which you mentioned as well, like the mental health aspect. And that, got me thinking, it's a subject that we have not touched on today, which we probably maybe need a whole nother episode about, which is the hormones and the hormonal balance and the mental health behind our hunger and our need for nutrition, right?
Yes.
But that's a whole zone by itself. I don't think we'll probably have time today to dive deep into it. By the way, in the comments below, please do comment if you want an episode around that. We'll be more than happy to kind of dive into that as well. Because, once again, we are... It's about, as we said, that kind of mental state and lifestyle, but we are also kind of controlled by our own hormones as well, right? And our cycles and like when to eat and when not to eat. A very good example is, for example, the hormone ghrelin, which controls when we eat and when we get that urge for like, oh, it's lunch, it's time to eat, right? That's something you can actually modify quite well. But anyways, we're not going to get into that too much. Maybe in another episode. What we do have left, though, to maybe try to round off our episode here is looking at the future of nutrition and dieting. So it feels like, as you said, Julia, since World War II, we're starting to look at nutrition more as a vehicle to now live longer and healthier. All this talk about longevity nowadays as well. So what do you think about the future of, food and nutrition? How will that look like, let's say, in the next 50 or 100 years? Will we consume differently? Will you 3D print our foods on plates? How do you think that will develop in the next decades?
Yeah, I think there will still be a lot of focus on obesity and obesity treatment or prevention of weight gain. There's also quite the focus on nutrigenetics. So how do the foods we eat influence our genetic expression, which is partly used already to see whether a combination of foods is enhancing a certain genetic expression that affects our metabolism differently. In a way, it can beneficially influence carbohydrate and lipid metabolism for treating obesity. So that's quite interesting. But also the other way around, how do the genetics determine what we actually need nutrition-wise? What's also becoming quite popular is nutritional psychiatry. So
nutritional psychiatry.
It's that's the term these days, exactly. To just see how food can be used to prevent mental illnesses or even treat mental illnesses, exactly. Because there are certain key nutrients that can enhance brain health and that can be detrimental for it. Just thinking if there's anything else. Lots of more research, I think, about the microbiome and how that influences or interacts with the metabolic pathways. So
essentially more and more which kind of goes into personalized medicine, right? And personalization, DNA menus, whatever you have it, and you get these modified for you. Lucas, how about you? What do you think about the future of nutrition?
I think the future of nutrition is very interesting. I would suggest, for example, if you go to the hotels in Nairobi now, you'll hardly find a breakfast that doesn't have the local ndoma and other local foods. So it looks like we're moving back to the basics. If you look at some of the vegetables that are popularized in Kenya, for example, managus, for example, these were used to be vegetables that were used by maybe one or two ethnic groups in some section, but now has been brought up. And many people are actually looking for it, and and you can see it. You can see now there's almost back to the basics. And I think that's what we need to really think about. As we do precision nutrition, it's important to look at back to the basics to see what are those things that we were designed to metabolize. What can we metabolize? I mean, there are ethnic groups that actually can eat raw meat and metabolize it. I mean, ceviche, right? But there are people you can't. They won't be able to metabolize it because it's just not a thing they do. So I think we need to move away from generalization to specialization, either whether it's ethnic wise, either whether it's going to be personalized, but we have to really need to see, what do you need? And again, the most important part, I think, is the mental health also aspect of it. What is that mental health thing? What is that thing that we're teaching our kids now about how to interact with foods smartly? What is that way to interact with food that is not deleterious, but is supportive? Correct.
I mean, makes a lot of sense. And to try to round off everything, we've had a wonderful conversation. A lot of things that I would have loved to maybe touch on even more. Nutrition, honestly, you cannot contain it within 1 hour or 2 hour episode on a podcast. There's so many things to explore.
Correct.
But we hope that this has been educational for our audience. And if there is one thing that you'd like somebody watching this podcast or listening into this podcast to kind of take with them, what would that be, Julia?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's also important not to be too rigid with your diet, not to try to be perfectly healthy. I think a very strict diet can be quite isolating, which impacts your mental and emotional health. And in the end, I think it's about the holistic health, mental health, even spiritual health, physical health, and also emotional health. And to eat mindfully. I think this was already discovered by Eastern philosophies compared to Western science, that you take time to eat your food. Maybe you're grateful for the food you're eating, and have no distractions. And also don't judge yourself in case you eat something that's maybe not considered as healthy, but just eat for self-care, and don't necessarily have to restrict yourself or completely condemn certain foods from your diet. It's more about the quantity or the frequency that you're consuming it.
I'll preach to that, I'll say. So, Lucas, how about you?
I mean, you could be more right, Julia. In terms of mindful eating, mindful harvesting of the food, mindful consumption, and just who are you eating with, how are you eating it, how do you eat on the way walking, do you eat with your phone next to you so that you can answer a text or something. The epigenetics of what the genetics that we are trying to, the epigenetics factors of all these things that we are doing is changing how we interact with food and everything else. So I think that mindful way where you decide, okay, fine, I'm going to eat an hour, I'll put my phone aside and enjoy my meal, and not to swallow it, chew it, because digestion starts from the mouth. If you don't digest properly in the mouth, you have things, you've heard of things like leaky gut and other things. You get food into the belly that is not ready to get to the belly because you didn't mash it, you didn't chew it properly for it to start the digestion process. So then we actually lose nutrients that way too, because by the time it gets in, it's not ready to start being absorbed. So I would say that is the mindful. And then one last thing, I started with this, I'll end with it. Let the kitchen be your pharmacy. What are those things that you can eat that will keep you healthy? And I am not telling you become a militant about it. It's not a fight. It's just, what is that thing that you'll enjoy? How can you make your kitchen enjoyably a pharmacy to keep you healthy? That's a question to you, and make a decision on it.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Make your kitchen your pharmacy, eh? That's something I'll take with me as well. It's been great having both of you here. Thank you so much, Dr. Julia and Dr. Lucas, for coming and taking the time. We do really appreciate it. And to all of our listeners out there watching on YouTube or Spotify, until next time, we have another episode coming up, which is going to touch on a lot regarding health economics. And we will just be discussing the price of life, actually, in monetary value. So it's going to be a very interesting episode. But until then, as we say, let's go beyond and stay healthy and take care.